Hey everybody, General Sky here, and in the last video we went over how to set up the swappable animation states for the characters. In this video I want to go over how to sort of combine this with the ability to have a blended state tree or a blended tree for walking around, and how to sort of cancel the utility animation whenever you start walking or do something else. So I've created very quickly a very simple controller script. This will, let me just zoom in here, takes a nav mesh agent that we have on our player, and it does an input, it does a raycast whenever you click. So whenever you get the mouse button down, it sends out a raycast from where you click on the screen outwards, and then it checks if the layer that the raycast hit is the layer ground, and if it is, then it moves the player. Very simple. It sets the destination in the agent. So I created a new layer up in layers, edit layer, and I added a new layer called ground. And then on the ground, I gotta go to my scene view. On the ground itself, I changed its layer to ground. I also made it navigation static, and in the navigation tab, which you can go to window, let's see, where is it? I always seem to be moving it. Window, AI, navigation, and bake it. On the bake tab, hit bake, and then it'll bake anything that's navigation static. And you need to have a nav mesh baked for the nav mesh agent to be able to move around. So that's why I did that. So that allows the player, whoa, hello. That back, lets the player, will let you click somewhere on the ground and it will move the player. So we're going to be integrating this with a blend tree to have walking animations going from like an idle to a walk to a run. And then we're going to be setting that up so that we can cancel the animations that we swapped to with when we start walking. So let's just get started with that. I've assigned a new character controller, character movin', just so we can separate these two out. I have all the files and everything on my GitHub, which would be in the link in the description. So you can check out the files if you want to see how, if you want to download it, work around it yourself, sort of mess around with it and stuff like that. So we have our utility state. This is the same state machine we had before, and we have our base state. We're going to be changing our base state. We're going to create a new state, and this is going to be a blend tree. So we're just going to call this move. And in our blend tree, we're going to double click on the blend tree up here. So that'll take us into the blend tree sort of menu, and it creates a parameter up here. You'll see this is the parameter that it's going to be taking its values from. So a blend tree will take a value from, by default, from 0 to 1. And it will, based on the value, it'll blend between different animations. You can change it, what values it goes between, but default it's 0 to 1, and a default creates one called blend. Since this is going to be our run, we're going to change this to run speed, so we can use that as a value to sort of blend between them. And it'll automatically change it up here. So to add some animations, we're just going to hit the plus button down here under motion and add a motion field. This will let us put in an animation clip. Looking through this, I want to go from idle to walk to run. So the only one that has it in this animation set for the villager animations is like carrying. So we're going to go carrying, add a motion field. And then we're going to add carrying walk. So as you can see, it sort of creates this tree up here, or this graph. It lets you see how it's blending between them based on different values. And then we'll go carrying run. And so we can also, on the bottom right here, you might, if you don't see this thing, it's probably docked at the bottom, and you can just drag it up to be able to see it. And if you hit play, it'll actually show you the animations, and you can drag this around here and see how it transitions between everything. So that's pretty neat, right? Okay. So just you can do that just to make sure everything's working properly. And here, if you set it to automatic thresholds, it'll go like 0.5, whatever, and you can set these to whatever. So you can change these values to be bigger or smaller depending on the value that's going to be put in here. We'll probably change that a little bit later, or we can do some math in the code to make sure that it's all working properly. So So we have our blend state here. We're going to make this the new layer default. So this is what's going to be going in, what the player is going to be doing right away. And we can just actually just get rid of this base state because that just has the idle animation, which our new blend tree also has when you don't have any movement speed. So we're going to make a transition back from our util to our move state, and we're going to go make this the util exit like we did last time. Oops, get rid of that second one. If you just, okay, util exit, if that's true, it'll change. And we're also going to be adding a new bool here. We're just going to call this util stop. And what this will do, we'll change this value when we want to exit out of the util and go back to the movement like immediately. So we'll make a new transition, and then we get these extra arrows here. So if you click on this, there's a list of transitions up here now. So this bottom one is the one that we made first, where the util exit is true. It'll exit out, and this one has exit time, so it'll only exit after the animation is finished. And then if we click on the top transition, the new transition we added, we can add a condition for util stop, and that's true, but we also don't want exit time. So if it doesn't have exit time, then it will just like immediately go from wherever it's at into the next state. It won't wait for the animation to finish playing, which will be nice. So I think that's all we need to do. Make sure that this transition is still set to util. Yep, okay. I think that's all we need to do for the animation state machine. Perfect. So next step is I'm going to be taking this controller and I'm going to be adding in the player animations stuff that we had. Just going to be sort of substituting it. So I'm going to right click on this tab and split vertically. I'm using JetBrains Writer for my editing, by the way, but you should be able to do this sort of stuff in like Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code and things like that. But JetBrains Writer, I really like. It's very nice. So yeah, so we're just going to be copying and pasting some of the stuff in here. So we'll take this animation stuff, plop it in here, just sort of making it a universal kind of controller instead of separating it out. We could keep it separate as well, but I'm just going to stick them all together, just so it's so we can just work in one script instead of having to jump between a couple different ones. All right, so now that all should just work by itself. So now that we've done this, we also want to change our animation swapper code a little bit. This is the one thing on the cubes that we click and it'll switch the animation. So we're going to keep the player animations just so we don't break the old stuff, but we're also going to add a controller, which is what this code is called. Oh, it looks like I already added one. Looks like I did that. Okay, forgot to delete that. But yeah, so we're just going to add this controller here. And then here, when we tell it to do the animation thing, we're going to check if player. And so we can actually just check a thing. This is doing the same thing as if player not equal to null. So it's just checking if it's null or not. And sometimes you can do it. There's some things you can't do that on, so you'll have to do the equals null or not equals null. But a lot of the times you can just do the controller, and we'll just do controller dot anims util. It's the same method, same everything. So that should just work. And also, so if you have a line indented below an if statement, it'll act as if it's in the if statement without having to do the curly braces, but it'll only work for one line. So if you add an extra line under it, like whatever, you know, then that won't act as if it's in the if statement and you'll need curly braces. But if you've just got one line inside of an if statement, you can just do it as an indented under the if statement to save a bit of time, which is nice. Okay, so we got this working. Let's make sure that this all works properly and go to a red and blue cube and just drag in our this, and we'll remove the player thing, which means we're also going to remove the player animation script from our player, and we'll also have to reassign our animator and our utility animation clip here. Okay, so if everything worked well, should still be able to do that. And that exited, and yep, and we can still move around. So now we need to set it up to where when we start moving, it will cancel the utility animation. And so for that, if we go into our controller, I'm going to right click and do unsplit. So we just get it the full thing now. In our move, what we can do is before we set our destination, since we have access to the animation, so anims.set bool util stop. And we're going to set this to true. So when it's true, it's going to stop the animation and just go back into the move state. That's how we have it set up. But we also want to be able to turn it off. So because when we turn it on and we don't ever turn it off, we're never going to be able to go into a utility state. So when we assign a clip to the thing, we're also just going to turn it off. So anims.set bool util stop false. Okay. Now, if we go in and we hit this and we start walking, and then if we walk, it goes back to our other animation, which a little bit of a difference because they're both carrying animations, but we can also, yeah. So if we do this and we start walking, it'll cancel the mining animation and go right into the walk. So now we'll want to tie the blend state animation, this run speed, to something, which we'll be using the agent's magnitude. So we're just going to create another method here called, it's going to be private void update run speed. And this will take our anims.setFloat, and we'll do run speed and set this equal to agent.velocity.magnitude. So this will basically get the speed of our agent, our nav mesh agent that we're using to move around as the nav mesh. And we'll go and just do this in update. So we can just update that. We're just updating that value, but it'll only like blend the stuff when it's in the state, so we don't have to worry about it like messing that thing up. So now if we hit play, and I'm going to select the villager human so we can see the values updating. So now he's actually walking instead of just sliding around, which is nice. But also we're going from 0 to 3.5 because that's what the character speed is set to in our speed here. So a few things we can do is we can get a float, public float. Oh, it says I'm editing in play mode. Let's stop. Thank you, writer. Okay, public float max speed. And this will be the speed that is like how the maximum the player goes, or, you know, the player's max speed. In a way, we can even just set it to the agent's speed. I'm not going to do that because then we can move the max speed and I can show you the walking and stuff a little easier. Okay, in our update run speed, we're going to use this max speed value to sort of normalize the magnitude to get it between a value between 0 and 1. Because the blend tree, again, it goes by default from 0 to 1. We can change that. I'll show you how to change that after this. By default is 0 to 1. So for this, we're just going to normalize it into a value between 0 and 1, and then use that to just drive the blend tree. So we can take our agent. So actually, normal, we're going to make a new variable, float norm, call it norm for the normalized speed, equals agent.velocity.magnitude over our max speed. So this will, you know, divide the two values, and it'll give us a value between 0 and 1 basically, unless agent velocity goes over the max speed, which right now it shouldn't if we set it properly, which actually we should set a default here. So it doesn't start at 0. Let's go 3.5 since that's the default. 3.5f because got to declare it as a float, and then we just replace this magnitude, agent magnitude, with our new normalized value, and that'll take our speed, turn it into a value between 0 and 1 based on our max speed, which is set to 0 right now because the inspector updated. And then that'll sort of let us get our walking speed. So you can see now the run speed is going between 0 and 1. And so we can also just change our max speed. So if we change this to 5, our max will end up being, looks like 0.7. So 3.5 is 7 times 2. So now it should be 0.5. So now it goes into the walk animation. Or we could even go back to 3.5 and go into our agent and change our agent speed. So if we change this to like 1.25, now it'll do the walk animation and at a, more or less walking speed. So that's one way that we can get this value to work in the blend stuff. Let's undo this. And I'll show you how to do it in the blend tree itself. So if we go back to our blend tree, double click on the motion up here in the blend tree, we'll turn off automate thresholds here. We can change these values here. These are the values at which they start blending into themselves. These values on the right, as I've just learned, they change the animation speed of the animation itself, so you can make them faster or slower if you want to. The threshold is the value from the parameter at which they will start blending. So since our max agent speed is 3.5, we're going to change these to, so this is 1.75 to get to the halfway point, not 1.25 like I was saying earlier, maybe 3.5. So, okay, we have to change the max one first, the bottom one. So the bottom one, 3.5 is our max speed, and then 1.75 for our mid speed. And then if we walk around, it should blend between them like it did when we sort of normalized it. So there's, two ways that you can change the blend parameters, sort of a thing. So, and then if we go to our animations, you can see that it still cancels them out, and we're blending between the stuff in the blend tree. Hooray! So I hope this has been helpful to somebody. All the code and everything is in the description below in my GitHub. It should have a link to the Git. So it has all the scripts, and you can download it and open the scene in Unity if you want to. Yeah,